I absolutely love the title God in Drag. I absolutely love that title.
It took a long time to get that title. I went through probably 5 titles before that one came in.
Okay, so now, I'm not going to ask the question the way a non-writer would ask the question, which is,
Mhm,
how did you come up with that title? Because in my opinion,
mhm.
that question assumes that there's a compelling story behind coming up with the title, but that's not necessarily true. I mean, most of my ideas just come to me, so I don't have a compelling story for how I
Well,
came
this
up with
one
stuff.
does have a more compelling story than some of my other titles. So this one came from, I mean, I had a bunch of different titles and I'm like, none of these work. I need another title. And I love Ram Dass. Like I love listening to him. He's got this wonderful voice. He's got this beautiful energy that comes through his voice. And so I'm sitting in a sauna listening to him on my iPod because it was that long ago when I got it.
Hmm.
And he tells the story about how with him and his mom, who is very close to, and
Hmm.
that sometimes they were mother and son, and sometimes they would slip into this other kind of consciousness in which they were both God and drag, walking each other home. And
Wait, they were
so
they were both God
they
in
were both
drag.
like they were like divine in disguise watching either like they flipped into that thing where they were not human so much as they were this aspects of consciousness and aspects of the divine, and that they were companioning each other in life. And
So the interesting thing about that
Mhm.
is what that tells me is by drag, you're not actually referencing a particular gender at all.
No, it is God in human disguise. Really,
Okay.
it's
All
God
right.
in human form. So drag meaning, taking on another form other than, the divine. Because we think of divine as something that is not physical. And so this is like the divine in human disguise.
Now,
So
isn't
that was
isn't that what Jesus Christ is supposed to be? Isn't that what isn't basically
yeah.
that's describing Jesus Christ, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if Jesus would call himself God in drag, but yes, I mean that was
No, he
it's the
probably
same
wouldn't.
idea. Or any of like, Vishnu or and Shiva, any of those, Zeus, any of these,
Hmm.
gods that had a human or a corporeal form, yeah, those would be
Hmm.
all an idea of God in drag. And the subtext of the book is that, we all have this element to us. It's a fairly gritty book, so it's not really a highfalutin thing, but it's got a lot of philosophy in it and
Hmm.
different sorts of things. The title, when I heard that, and the title hit me like a sledgehammer, and
Well,
I
same here.
sat
Same
there
here,
for a
actually.
while. Yeah, and I sat there and I thought, "Can I call a book God in Drag?" I was like, "I don't know if I could do that. Like, is that even allowed? Like, what could I do?" So I sat with her for a little while, and I called a writer friend of mine, and she's like, "You can do it." She goes, "Oh my god, it sounds like a great title." She goes, "Oh, wow," So it took a little while to hold on to it because this was like 2015 when I published it, and I
Hmm.
probably got the title 2 years before that or the year
Okay.
before that. So it wasn't like today where it would be a little bit more like, "Oh yeah, that's not that big of a deal." But at the time I thought, "Poof," it landed really with a big punch when I chose that title.
Talk a little bit more about that. What do you mean it landed with a big punch? Like it landed in the publishing industry with a big
No,
punch,
in my
or?
body. No, when I
Oh,
heard the
okay.
title, like, it landed I know publishing industry, I haven't been able to break through them, but It landed in my body like this massive, ball of energy, and it, like, kind of gave more energy and a new not a new focus or anything, 'cause they didn't change that much in the book, but it really brought a different energy to the book when I was doing a final edit, and I actually at one point, because it used to be all in 3rd person,
Hmm.
and there was a week that we were supposed to go to the beach, and we couldn't go to the beach because it was a hurricane, and so I was there, we had company, but it wasn't really they were doing their own thing, so I just
Right.
redid everything from the main character's point of view, which brought that whole energy through,
Okay.
and really remade the book from a first person perspective, and
Hmm.
from his perspective, that God and drag idea, it really flowed through. So it was a game changer in terms of both the title and then changing the point of view of the book and then really infusing the character in the book with more energy than it had.
Wow. Okay. That's great. That's a great, a great story. That experience is great when it happens.
Yeah.
I'm sort of familiar with something similar, at least. If it's
Hmm.
not exactly what you're talking about, it is great. So, okay. So how was the book received? Because I think it's interesting that you actually sat for some time and thought, can I publish a book with this title? Because that's another one of the reasons why I love the title so much, because you said it's not controversial now. Well, actually the difference
Well,
now
my
is
uh-huh.
well, the difference now is that there are a lot of different, fairly well established political views and ideologies and
Hmm.
perspectives and rhetoric that could be, that can, latch on to a title like that and
Hmm.
sort of turn it into whatever they want it to be.
Right. Yeah.
But you're right. In 2015, the world was different in that sense that we didn't have these well established influencers who have like
Hmm.
a track record of basically pushing a particular agenda and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. So how was it received when you finally got it out there?
Well, it was received by people wwho read it
Mhm.
wonderfully,
Okay.
but it
Okay.
was really about getting it out to more and more people, to read it. So 2015, there was not the same scope of availability of promotion as there is now, and there wasn't as much of a hassle. Like, so you couldn't really do very easily like Amazon ads. That wasn't you could do them, but they weren't really that great for fiction. There
Mhm.
was not and I was in a place I was just like, I got it out and I'm like, "You are born, go forth and be free."
Okay.
So I really did not do as much as I could have done at the time because again, there was a lot going on, family, caretaking, life, and
Mhm.
all of that, and
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
wanted to get it out, and I got it out, and then life took over, and I promoted it in some ways, the people who read it really liked it. I had tried to get it to an agent before I published it myself, but I
Right.
didn't really get very far with that, haven't gotten very
Mhm.
far with my other novel because it doesn't really fit into at the time, like, now everybody wants things that are, like, multi-genre,
Mhm.
genre crossing, genre bending, all of this stuff,
Mhm.
but I've also still found that there's some particular things that agents are looking for that, like, my books don't really fit easily into that.
Mhm.
But at the time, they wanted to know where exactly on the shelf it sat, and they didn't want it to deviate. You could not be in 2 different shelves. There was not the genre mixing. They really wanted genre stuff, and literary was not a thing that people were pushing at all
Mhm.
at the time. It didn't really fit into a category. It has got some philosophy. It's been described as like magical realism, philosophy, travel fiction, has a real little romance in there.
Mhm.
But it doesn't really fit neatly into anything besides, like, psychological fiction or literary fiction, and at
Mhm.
the time, those were harder sells, and
Right.
I didn't want to and I have a number of friends who are published writers, and they were like, "Yeah, this is a game that you might not wanna play,
Mhm.
because it's changed a lot."
Mhm.
And there's a lot of four-letter words that would go there if I was gonna actually actually quote what people have said. So when I didn't get much of a response with that, like, I wasn't that big of a deal, and I'm not like a book a year kind of person, which I know
Mhm.
is a part of that publishing game. So,
Right.
anyway, so I published that, and the people who read it loved it, and I did have this really interesting this was a lot of fun. I went and I did Friends of the Library book fair where I was the speaker and one of 5 speakers, and,
Mhm.
I had my books and all that, and people bought the books, and I got a number of people who said that of all the books and the other 4 were traditionally published and all of that, that they liked my book best,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
so I was like, "Well, thank you," you know? And so it was nice to hear, even though it didn't really push book sales very much, because it's not in bookstores and all that. So it was an interesting path. Still on the path. I'm getting a new cover, so I'm moving back into that game.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, that's good to hear. Um, yeah, that everything you said sounds familiar. I don't have the benefit of established writers who have been traditionally published to give me the honest feedback about, okay, we know the industry, we know what we have to do,
Mhm.
and this is a game that this book is just not going to play well in,
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. No, but I think things have changed a lot. In some ways, the publishing industry is going through some changes that remind me of what's going on with traditional television,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I'm hoping that there really is an opportunity out there with the gatekeepers being in disarray for people like us to sort of figure out ways to sort of get, reach our audiences directly.
I think so. Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I decided to publish to serialize the novel that I'm working on now.
Mhm.
I figure, well, one is kind of complicated. That's one thing, and it's going to take people a while to sort of get used to all the different dimensions of
Mhm.
the story. But I also figured, maybe I'll reach an audience by the time I'm finished with the novel and I'm
Mhm.
ready to publish it, and I'm going to do the audiobook full cast and all that stuff, just like I did with Coliseum. So hopefully I
Good.
can do the whole pre-order thing and debut at number 1.
There you go. Well, and I think you're right because it seems like, trust in institutions is crumbling,
Oh, yeah,
period.
definitely. Oh,
And as
absolutely.
publishing has kind of consolidated into, like, the 5 big players,
Mhm.
and people are seeing the quality of books that never got into that.
Mhm.
It was different when there was not as much of a quality book, and we do have an AI slot problem on the indie publishing side, but I think that, that will sort itself out as people can see who writes good books and who doesn't write good books.
Right.
But I think as people are like, "Well, why are these 5 gatekeepers, telling me what I can and can't read and in charge
Mhm.
of the whole system," when,
Mhm.
people begin to look outside of that system intentionally for other kinds of books and, other authors to read. So I think that will probably be something that benefits us, generally speaking, and that we can reach people more directly, and that people will be more inclined to look for indie books and not stigmatize indie books because you couldn't get in with a traditional publisher.
Well, I also think it being so much easier for people to kind of get a sense of you as the author.
Mhm.
Like anyone who knows me would know that, oh, I know Henry. This Coliseum totally sounds like Henry. And I'm sure that people say the same thing about
Yeah,
you, God
yeah,
and Drag totally sounds like Christine.
yeah.
And I think when, for people to feel that way would make them a lot more like they feel like they have a sense of you. They don't know you, but they have a sense
Mhm.
of you. And they're just like, I kind of like where that person's coming from. Let me check
Yeah.
this out. They're talking about it. And I think it also helps to talk about other books that you read because they may
Mhm.
have read, a lot of people may be familiar with these other books and they're like, well, I like that book actually. I agree with this person.
Yeah,
So I definitely think that the potential is there. Let's just put it like that. We'll see
I
what
think you're
actually
right.
happens. The potential is there though.
It is, and there's so many more ways to get out to people, just like what you're doing now with this and putting it out on Substack
Mhm.
and building an audience that way. I think that,
Yeah.
we've gone from having 3 network stations to having so many different ways to interact with people and to
Mhm.
get a message out that I think ultimately it will shrink everybody's audience, but it will help everybody get to the people and the audience that works for them.
Right. And I think actually toward the end of like the traditional publishing dominance, that's basically what they were doing is they were basically
Mhm.
narrow casting, because I'm always surprised when I discover a book that I like and I'm like, wait a second, this book has 20,000 reviews. I've never even heard of this book.
Uh-huh.
How
Yeah.
is it possible that, I mean, because 20,000 reviews means that they sold way more copies
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
most people don't review a book. And
right.
so for it to be have found an audience that big, and yet
Yeah.
I'm just discovering it 7 years later or whatever.
Mhm.
That just goes to show that you can narrowcast pretty successfully,
Yeah, I think so. And then,
you
like,
know?
for me, like, with the John Mars Tale, like, once you find an author whose books really intrigue you, I'll read them all, and
Mhm.
then I move on to somebody else. So I'm a serial reader when somebody has something that I really like.
So you said that you are into audiobooks. Did you even pursue the idea of making an audiobook version of God and Drag or
It is on the list of things to do, like, I need to get
okay.
the new cover, I got other stuff happening, but, it was a question I had for you because, I know that there's what is the Amazon one, not the Audible one, ACX or whatever that
ACX,
is.
yeah. Yeah, ACX.
ACX, and then that keeps it confined to the Audible ecosystem, but yours is not that, and it's so well done, and I didn't know I haven't really investigated all the different ways that that's possible now.
Well,
So,
I
maybe
can
you
save you a lot of time. So
Oh, that'd be great.
ACX is actually not just confined to Audible. ACX
Oh,
also publishes on Apple Books or Apple Music.
okay. Uh-huh.
So, but I found that the best way to do this, and there were downsides, but compared to everything else, is the best way to do it.
Mhm.
You want to find your own actors, your own studio. They're willing to work just as a service and you have all the rights. So you're just paying them as freelancers, you're paying them as
Mhm.
contractors. And the price can vary a whole lot depending upon your situation. So I have my older audiobooks, I lucked out. I just sort of asked around. I was living right outside of Chicago at the time.
Mhm.
I asked around and it turns out that a an actor who was also a director and also really well known in the theater scene in Chicago lived in the same community that I lived in. I didn't know that, but turns out she
Wow,
did.
okay.
And she sort of had an idea of what I was trying to do. And so she was just like, okay, so these are my terms.
Mhm.
If these terms are okay with you, then let's work together. And so we were able to get essentially four short audiobooks out, and
Mhm.
I was able to produce something like seven books because when I had one and two, then I could publish one and two together, and then when I had
Uh-huh.
one, two, and three, I could publish them individually, and then the three together. And so that was one thing. And she also knew of a professional sound engineer who also lived in the same community.
Oh my gosh, you did luck out.
Well, this community, I mean, it's Oak Park, Illinois, and so
Mhm.
Oak Park is just like that. There are just a lot of resources in Oak Park, and I've said I've been all over the country. I have never seen a better place to raise kids. I mean, it just
Wow.
Oak Park is just like that.
Okay.
So I'm in New York now, and I actually
Mhm.
did sort of try the same thing. I figured I could find. I mean, there are a ton of actors here, a ton of directors. I knew
Yeah.
that, but the city is so much bigger than Chicago that it
Mhm.
doesn't it's hard to do something like that, especially
Yeah.
since I'm not actually from New York City. And
Right.
so eventually I Googled um recording studios, and the one that I found, I chose it because it mentioned ACX, but it also mentioned Authors Republic, I think. Now,
Okay.
Authors Republic is an aggregator. So if you have, once you record your book because you found your actor or
Mhm.
actors, you use the professional studio at least to do the post production because you don't necessarily need a professional studio to do the
Mhm.
recording because a lot of voice actors have their own studios in their houses.
Okay.
So you've got your recording, okay? You want to create an ACX account and then you
Mhm.
upload that recording to the ACX account. And the benefit of having a professional studio do the processing is it will pass
Right.
ACX's standards. That's
Okay.
really what you need. And so when you do that, ACX is going to publish it on Amazon, Audible, and also Apple Music and other platforms that most people have never heard of.
Okay.
And so, but you want to choose non-exclusive with
Okay.
ACX.
Yeah.
That allows you to
Yeah.
publish it in other places.
Okay.
You create an account on Authors Republic. Now, Authors Republic isn't the only alternative aggregator. It just happens to be the most stable alternative
Okay.
aggregator. There was another company called Findaway Voices that was bought by Spotify. It almost
Mhm.
seems like Spotify got tired of it, so they
Mhm.
sold it.
Oh my gosh.
And now people who went that route are now complaining because they're all confused. And so with Authors Republic, it's smaller, but it's been the
Mhm.
same for years. I mean, I published my first audiobook with Authors Republic probably in 2012 or something like
Oh,
that.
wow. Okay.
And I've had the account the whole time. I haven't had any problems with them. The downside of Authors Republic that's very different from ACX is when you have a sale on ACX, you see a change in your author rank in your book's ranking, seller
Mhm.
ranking on Amazon. So
Okay.
that's actually, I mean, you have books on Amazon, so
Right,
when the
yeah.
book sells, your book goes from like 1,000 whatever in the category
Mhm.
down to like 400 or 200.
Right.
Okay. Well, the same thing happens when you sell audiobooks. And then probably in about 8 hours or so, you go into ACX. Not only do you see that, yes, you did have one, two, or three
Mhm.
sales, but you also see where those sales came from, what countries.
O Okay.
So my first sale was actually in Germany.
Really?
Yeah, my first sale was in Germany, and I attribute that to the UK voiceover actor that I have on my
Okay.
Billy Ford Brown. That I
Uh-huh.
attribute that to her.
Okay.
But when the book sells, like I recently, after I started podcasting on Substack, for the first time, I sold a book in France. I mean, it's just, and it's good to know that because it's like, I feel like I can credibly connect that
Mhm.
sale to Substack because Substack, as you know, also shows you where people are coming from to your
Okay.
Substack. And I
Yeah.
noticed that, oh, okay, I'm going through. And for the Council of Nobles, there are actually like about 2 dozen countries that people from different places are listening to the Council of Nobles. And so when France popped up, that's when I got this email from ACX saying, okay, we'll convert the money from the euro to the blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, this thing is actually benefiting
Good.
me.
Good for you.
And so what Authors Republic does is you have your book, have your audiobook already on ACX,
Mhm.
and Amazon and Apple. And with Author Republic, it now appears on like 2 or 3 dozen other platforms that you've probably never heard of because you're not
Okay.
Swedish. What is it? Storytel is in Sweden.
Okay.
Or in Turkey, there's another one that's really popular that before Authors
Mhm.
Republic, I never heard of it. But that's where people in Turkey or people in Sweden, that's where they buy their audiobooks.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
Authors Republic gives you that. Now, the downside of Authors Republic is
Uh-huh.
they don't have the same reporting, because they have like 2, 3, 4 dozen different platforms that they're receiving
Mhm.
information from. You may not know when you have a sale for like a month or two. That's the downside
Okay.
of Authors Republic.
Alright.
But they're the most stable alternative aggregator out there.
Okay. Thank you very much. You saved me hours and hours of work.
Yeah, you could waste a lot of time and actually a little
Yeah.
money, doing it the other way.
You had asked, you said you want to read a little passage from God and Drag, and I
Oh,
think
yes, that would
that
be
might help
yes.
people get a more of a sense of the book because it is hard to get, we were talking about, it's hard to get a sense of it when it doesn't really fit into any kind of genre and stuff. So I did pick out a little passage, and it kind of speaks to the name, the God and Drag name, because people, but it's a little bit into the book, and it's a conversation between Micah, the main character, who is there looking for his guru stepfather Raj,
Okay.
who's mentioned in the little passage, and Amy, who is a 19-year-old from Virginia who's on the run after stealing money from her father's business in order to escape his clutches.
Mhm.
And Amy and Micah have a contentious relationship. They are not love interests, but they've got some contention in there. And Amy is a target of a local drug dealer and pimp because she needs money. And Micah is trying to, interfere in that process to be sure that she has what she needs without having to, rely on this other guy. So this takes place. So he had, right before this passage, he had paid a debt of hers so that she wouldn't have to get money from Aji, who's the drug dealer. And she says that she still needs money to buy Christmas presents for all of the volunteers at the hospice. And that sets up this little passage here.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Here. Right. So we start with Micah talking.
Okay.
Like you'd buy me a present, Ames, I said. She pursed her lips as if I'd offended her. I pulled out the rupees I'd put in my pocket and gave her $50 worth. Listen, you need money, don't go to Aji, all right? She didn't nod or shake her head, but she pocketed the money without missing a beat. Kate says Audrey wants something from any girl he gives money to, Amy said. She's got that right, I said. Audrey always has an agenda. Amy eyed me suspicious. What do you want from me? Fair question. Even though I'd never pressed her for anything, I'd never actually thought about it in those terms. I want you to go home, Ames. Why? Why do you care? Because one of us should get the dream, have kids, grow old, live a happy life. Her gaze steeled. Why me and not you? Damn, she'd been hanging around Kate too long. The truth was too ugly to share. Amy was the ghost of a girl I'd known at the commune. Grace had been 15 at the most and a wisp of a thing. But to my 9-year-old self, she glistened with grown-up worldliness. One of the guys brought her to the commune to get her off the street after she'd offered her body for cash, heroin, whatever he had to swap. An addict who looked fresh from Sunday school, Grace flared into a commune flashpoint in under a week. Some fought to protect her like a little sister gone astray. Others said she'd take the place down if she OD'd. Raj weighed in with one of his more colorful culture-clashing turns of phrase, saying that she, like all of us, was God in drag, and asked each person to treat her as the divine in human disguise. One bliss-filled afternoon on the porch hammock, Grace painted her toenails and then mine a blinding blood red. As she did, she told me about hitchhiking from Oklahoma to the coast, her first time out of the state, her first hit of heroin, the first time she held up a gas station, her first trick. It played like tragedy now, but at the time I'd crowned her a magical princess infused with the supernatural power to flee dark forces and slay dragons until she rode triumphant into the promised land of the commune. From this vantage, I knew she talked to herself that day, not to me. She recited the details of her story over and over to make sense of it, searching out a happily ever after that eluded her. A few days later, high on heroin, she jumped spread-eagled off the roof like she could fly. The fall hadn't killed her outright, and neither had the heroin, but she died a few days later, unable to fly into the happy ending she'd been trying to conceive. Tell you what, Ames, you go home, be happy, then maybe I will too. If not, I shrugged, then no joy. You're weird, she said, but there was a hint of a smile on her face. And I really was going to get you something for Christmas. She flicked her navel ring absently with the tip of a finger. She told me she got that ring the same afternoon she ran off with her old man's money. She said he'd have killed her for vamping up, but since he'd kill her for taking the money, she risked it. Know what I'd like from you, Ames? How about one whole day where you don't scowl at me? 24 hours where you don't act like you want to slit my throat. The corner of her mouth turned up a notch. A whole day? Half a day, then. She snarled her lips in fake indignation. 2 hours, I said. That won't kill you. It might. I could hemorrhage or something. She looked up at the mat-covered ceiling to the blacklight Elvis watching over Ananda. But I could survive 15 minutes. 10 plus a smile. She cracked a grin, but directed it at Elvis. Okay, but only one smile. You drive a hard bargain, I said. She flashed the most genuine smile I'd ever seen from her. I had to grin back. Maybe she would be okay. Maybe we both would.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. I'm trying to sort of, at least in the conversation, give an idea of a little bit more of a concrete idea, because you keep saying that it's a little gritty. What do you mean by that? Does it
Well,
have some,
so the main character, so his name is Micah. He's 32 years old. He was
right?
raised in a California commune until he was about 10 years old. And the stepfather guru of that commune, he thought had abandoned him. And so he's
Hmm.
got a lot of these issues, but he's also got a lot of attitude. So, and he's a little bit of a gritty guy. And so
Okay.
he's got a lot of attitude. He speaks the book through his attitude. So it's not like a narrator is telling the story about this person. It's like him coming through telling the story from his perspective, and he's got a particular kind of perspective and
Hmm.
and a lot of attitude within him. And some gritty things happen. It takes place in India. He goes there to find his guru stepfather after a drunken confession at a party
Hmm.
reveals that his whole life had been built on a lie, and he wants to find out the truth. And the last time his life made sense was when this guy was in his life, and after
Hmm.
the guru's stepfather left, everything crashed and it got rebuilt on this new lie. And so
Hmm.
he went to go find him. Right up first in the novel, he's got this encounter slash accident that ends up potentially imperiling his life, but he starts volunteering at a Varanasi hospice
Mhm.
Varanasi being the city that a city of light that people go to in order to die, because if you die in Varanasi, you leave the wheel of samsara, of the cycle of birth and death. And so that's not why he was there. He was there looking for his friend, but he volunteers at a hospice for in exchange for medical care. There are three other Western volunteers at this hospice. Everybody's got their own secret past that they're trying to, you know, outrun or hide from.
Hmm.
And as he searches for his friend and ultimately gets presented with an answer that he's looking for, that answer comes with the strings that imperils all the volunteers' lives. And he really has to, thread the needle to see what's he going to do to be able to get the answers he wants without everybody getting killed.
Hmm. Interesting. So I saw in your Substack that you were in the Peace Corps.
I
Is that
was, yeah.
so? Was part of that time in India? Is that how the
Nope, that was a different trip and a different novel. That's my next novel coming out. So this one, I would travel with my husband. Long story short, we ended up without a place to live and we went to India with a one-way ticket. Landed
Mhm.
during a plague, it was very quiet there. And so we traveled India, Sri Lanka, and Nepal for about 8 months. And we spent about 6 weeks in Calcutta volunteering for Mother Teresa's Home for the Dying. And so my husband, who had been a hospice volunteer, like that was his element. He was right in there. He'd help take people to the cremation gas.
Mhm.
He'd done CNA training so he could do personal care and stuff, and he was fine with all of that. He was really in his element. Blood and body fluids, not my thing. And so I spent a lot of time like doing the laundry up on the top of the building. And I would go down and do, helping with the meals and things like that. But as I was up there, like my mind just started to wander and create stories because that's kind of what I did. And I'd already had a main character. I already had Micah bouncing around in my head
Mhm.
and since before that trip. And so I was up there and I was hanging sheets and stuff. And there was another guy came up and we were talking, and he was a British medical student. And this is like middle of springtime. And he's a British medical student. He's talking about what he's doing, and he's there kind of having an experience at the home for the dying. I didn't think too much of it. And then next day I went there and I was hanging up towels or stuff again. And I'm thinking, what is a British medical student doing in Calcutta in the middle of the semester? And so then
Mm.
my mind started wandering about, like, and then another character came about. And so then these other characters came in. And part of it was to kind of give some distance between me and all the blood and body fluids. And, just
Mhm.
it was very, the hospice, as much as they were doing really good work, because these were people who had no other care. They would have otherwise been at GATS or on the street and things like that. And it was very basic medical care, but they got food, they had beds, they had showers, and but it's still quite overwhelming. There's people dying all around you, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of work and a lot of, and I'm very empathic, so like I was sucking it up like a sponge. And so for me to create some distance, I started creating this story in my mind about like what if. So I had these characters and began to work on this idea of the people, these volunteers who come to a hospice for the home for the dying in not Calcutta because it was so big. We also visited the home for the dying in Varanasi, and a much smaller. Varanasi is a more contained city, and so
Mhm.
I put my volunteers there, and the visual kind of matched a little bit more of the Varanasi hospice. But that's how that book came about. And I've got my second novel that I started in my off time when I was in the Peace Corps and I was in Papua New Guinea. The whole different experience. And
Mm.
so I have a novel that is in the lineup to be out hopefully by the end of this year.
Okay. Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So where else have you been? So you've been to India, you've been to Papua New Guinea, have you been anywhere else? Because you've lived in these places. Have you lived anywhere else? I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
so, well, after college, I was an exchange student in high school in Australia. I did a semester in London in college. When I graduated from college, I went to Japan and taught English for
Wow.
about 14 months. And then
Mhm.
Um, they would give you either the money to fly home or they'd give you the money for something else. So, I was most scared of going to China for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And I also had wanted to I'd had this experience as a kid where I was like, I was done. I wanted out. And I walked into the yard and I kind of shook my fist at God and I said, you got to tell me why I'm here because I can't see the point of it. People are crazy. This place is madness. It's a waste of my time. I either need to know, I need to be done. So I had this kind of download of what I called unity consciousness. It was really just about like, how do you just allow life to live through you and trust that as opposed to trusting all the things that you learn in your brain about what you're supposed to do. So
Mhm.
when I was leaving Japan, I knew that was my inflection point, whether I was going to go the path of go home, get a career, do all the things you're supposed to do, or have a little adventure and tap into this and start to trust life that way and see how
Mhm.
it worked. And this is 1990s. There wasn't much support for this like there is now. And so I went to the place that scared me the most. I went to China and I traveled around by myself for about 6 weeks. And then I took the train from Beijing to Moscow and during the fall of the Soviet Union. And it was I came in kind of through the back door, so I didn't have to go through Intourist because Intourist was how you had to go at the time. And so you kind of got off at the train station, and people would say, "Got a room? Got a room? Got a room?" And so, I had friends I was traveling with at the time, and we got rooms together. And I traveled from there, spent some time there, Moscow, St. Petersburg, went to Riga, Latvia, had a nice little adventure there, Estonia, Poland, and I traveled when I was doing my semester in London, I traveled through Western Europe. And on the way back from the Peace Corps, went to back to Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, and American Samoa, and then little trips here and there for, Canada and, Caribbean cruise and that kind of stuff. Yeah, different places. I've got some more places I'd like to go. Went to Tunisia for a week, and that was
Uh-huh.
interesting.
Okay.
So other things on my bucket list, but those are the big ones that I've gone to, and a lot of that adventure was back in the day, and then life goes through its paths of changing. But I did go to India, Sri Lanka, Nepal with my husband, and we went to Papua New Guinea together, and
Mhm.
then we settled down.
So when you I think this was the second or third time you mentioned, talking to God,
Mhm.
and I get the impression that because you don't talk about that experience in the way that, say, a Christian would necessarily, or
No.
in the way that, say, a Muslim would necessarily. So are you channeling a particular, like, organized belief system, or is this just something that makes sense to you? Or how would you describe it?
I have always had a connection with whatever it is. Like, I was raised in a Christian household, so
Mhm.
at a time I'd call it Jesus, but it really wasn't the Jesus I learned about in school, in Sunday school. And then, a connection with God or the divine, but it wasn't really how I was taught to do that because never really made sense to me.
Mhm.
And so I always had that independent relationship. I'd my problem with religion, I've got many problems with religion, but one of them is that, they're all claiming to be exclusive to God or whatever God is, however whatever the name is, as if God didn't exist before religion.
Hmm.
And so to me, whatever the underlying reality of life is, to me, that is like God or the universe or consciousness or whatever you want it to be. And that is what it is, regardless of what you believe it to be. And
Mhm.
so to me, it's always been how do I, be in relationship with that versus trying to be in relationship with an idea about that. And
Hmm.
so religions always have this is my idea, this is our idea of what it is, this is how we've codified it, this is our dogma about it, and that becomes a substitute for God. So there's a great, I think the Buddhists talk about this, that the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. And so the moon or the divine of whatever that is its own thing. And
Mhm.
whatever your ideas about it, whatever finger you're using to point to that is not that. It
Hmm.
is our way of trying to understand that. But then when that way of trying to understand it becomes the more important than that thing itself, what's the point? Then it becomes a control mechanism. And so I mean, I've looked at different religions. God and drag was actually kind of a way to understand my experience there, but also to kind of understand a little bit more about Hindu philosophy, and particularly the god Shiva, who is very contradictory and interesting. And that
Mhm.
was Micah's kind of intro into who's the main character. That was his connection, is because he's a gritty god. But that helped me to understand that a little bit more, not because I wanted to believe in it, but because it gives different aspects of ways to ponder what that it is, whatever that divine nature is, because it has existed long before we were here, and it will continue to exist long after we are gone. And all the ideas about it change over time and fall into favor and out of favor and then become control mechanisms and all this kind of stuff. But it doesn't change the nature of what that is. And I'm much more interested in what that is than I am in, all the ideas about what it is.
I'm so glad I met you because I haven't had this kind of conversation or and when I say conversation, I'm thinking in terms of the last time I encountered ideas like this was when I was introduced to the book, The Tao of Physics. Have you ever heard of
Mhm.
that book?
Yeah, I read it years ago.
Yeah, well, me too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the last time I was introduced to stuff like that. And then, of course, the thing that made me decide to change my major from microbiology pre-med to
Yeah.
philosophy was I
Mhm.
read Sid Author and
Uh-huh.
and stuff like that. And so I was just like,
Yeah.
this is what I actually love is this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So yeah, this has been it's been nice because it's hard to find conversations like this.
That's
Um,
why I did my podcast, because I like to talk about this stuff.
yeah, me too.
And, it's hard to have conversations like this out in, like, the normal Muggle world, you know?
Right, right, right. That's awesome.